Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle without hurry. There is nowhere to go now and nothing you need to hold in place. The day can remain exactly as it is for a little while longer. The light does not need to soften all at once. The warmth does not need to arrive yet. You only need to let yourself come in from the cold, one quiet moment at a time. Tonight's story is called Falling Asleep by the Fire in a Snowy Cottage. The snow has already been falling long enough to change the shape of the day. Not heavily, not in any way that would turn the lane difficult, only steadily enough that edges have begun to soften under it. The low stone wall beside the path no longer holds its lines as sharply as it did an hour earlier. The grass beyond it has taken on a quieter color beneath the pale gathering of white. Even the hedge at the bend in the lane seems less made of separate branches now, and more of one continuous form, dark at its center, lightly caught at the outer twigs where the snow has begun to rest. Your steps have slowed without needing to be told to. The air is cold enough to keep the face awake, though not painfully so. It touches the bridge of the nose, the upper cheeks, the backs of your hands where the gloves do not reach all the way to the cuff. The wool of your coat holds the rest of you well enough. A little of the day's chill has settled into the outer layers of it, but not deeply. The body is still carrying its own warmth. It simply knows that warmth will soon be better kept elsewhere. Ahead, the cottage stands where the lane turns in slightly, and the low front garden narrows to a gate and 2 stone steps. It does not present itself grandly. The roof holds a whitening skim along its lower edge where the snow has begun to settle more firmly. One chimney rises darker against the pale sky. The windows do not glow yet. What light there is belongs to the afternoon, still, soft, and winter-thin, reflected upward from the snow-softened ground, resting faintly against the lower panes. The place looks shut against the weather, but not withdrawn from it. It has been standing in this cold for hours already, and has lost none of its steadiness. Another flake lands against the sleeve of your coat and melts into the wool almost at once. Others remain where they fall, on the gate latch, on the top rail, on the edges of the step where stone has cooled enough to keep them. The garden path between gate and door is still mostly visible, though a fine gathering has begun along the seams between the paving stones. The shrubs near the wall hold snow only at their uppermost leaves. Lower down they remain dark and wet close to the earth. You put a hand to the gate. The latch is colder than the wool around your fingers, a quick, clean chill through the glove where the metal presses. It lifts without sticking. The gate answers with a small wooden give and opens inward across the path, its lower edge moving over stone with a contained drag softened by the weather. The sound does not carry far. Snow does that to a place. It takes the harder edge away from contact and leaves only the fact of it. You step through and close the gate behind you. The 2 stone slabs of the path hold their own separate temperatures. One has already taken the snow more fully and feels quieter underfoot. The other is still dark in its center, damp and bare where the cold has not yet settled all the way through. The body notices these things without needing to dwell on them. The cottage door is only a few steps ahead now, its paint deepened by years of weather, its brass keyplate dull in the winter light, its lower threshold stone whitened at one edge where wind has pushed the snowfall under the lip of the step. The key sits in your palm with familiar weight. Its bow is smoother on one side than the other, worn by the way it is always held and turned. The metal has taken the outdoor cold. Even through the glove, its chill is distinct. You fit it into the lock. The movement is practiced, direct, without any need to check itself midway. Metal aligns inside metal. The mechanism gives with one measured turn. The door opens inward. At once the air changes, not into warmth yet, only into stillness. The difference is immediate enough to be felt before it is understood. Outside, the cold had movement in it, however slight. The quiet drift of snow, the fine passage of winter air along the lane, the open feel of the afternoon even under cloud. Inside, the cold is held. It rests in the boards, in the lower corners of the room, in the stone of the hearth not yet fully awakened. It does not touch the face in the same alert way. It meets you more evenly, as though the house has taken the weather in and quieted it. You step across the threshold. The mat inside the door is flattened at its center, rougher at the outer edges where the fibers have not been worn down by repeated boots. A little snow leaves your soles and darkens the weave in two small ovals before sinking in. The door closes behind you with a firm wooden contact and the contained click of the latch settling back into place. The room receives the sound and keeps it. No echo, only the cottage around it holding. For a moment you remain just inside, letting the body understand the shift fully. The air smells faintly of old timber, cooled iron, and the ash-dry remains of yesterday's fire. Nothing in the room is asleep exactly. Nothing has gone stale. It is simply waiting in its own winter way. The boards beneath your feet are cooler near the door than they are farther in. The window glass carries a pale, diffused light, but no inner glow. The hearth is laid, but dark. The kettle rests where it was left, quiet and unheated. A chair near the fire has a folded blanket over its back, still in the shape of having been placed there rather than used today. You lower one hand to the scarf at your throat and loosen it. The wool has kept a little warmth where it lay close against the skin. When you draw it free, a cooler pocket of room air slips in at once along the neck and collarbone. The body notices but does not object. This is not the cold outside. This is the last unlit coolness of a house before it is made ready. Your gloves come off next. The fingers meet the room differently without them. The air touches the skin more clearly. The key is set on the narrow shelf by the door where it always goes, within a shallow ring in the wood worn by years of being placed down in that same spot. Your coat follows, lifted from the shoulders and hung on the peg nearest the door. The peg leans a fraction outward from the wall, not enough to fail, only enough to show long use. The coat settles with a soft shift of fabric, its hem still carrying 2 or 3 small wet marks where melting snow has darkened the wool. Your boots leave the mat and move farther into the room. The boards sound different here. Still quiet, but less muted than at the door. One plank near the hearth gives a faint, contained creak under your weight. No complaint, only acknowledgement. Another, nearer the table, remains firm and soundless. The room is small enough that all its things already belong to one another. Hearth, table, chair, shelf, kettle, rug, stair. Yet none of them has fully stepped forward yet. They remain in waiting form, shapes held in pale winter light before fire, and evening change their meaning. Outside, the snow continues. You notice it first at the window, not as separate flakes, but as the outer world losing some of its detail. The lane beyond the glass is still there. The wall is still there. The gate and the hedge and the low bare branches near the path are all still visible. Yet they seem already farther away than they did only moments before, not because distance has changed, but because snowfall has begun to gather between you and them. The cottage window does not frame a scene. It holds weather in progress. You move toward the hearth. The iron grate is dark, but not empty of memory. A low drift of ash rests beneath yesterday's burned wood, pale gray at the edges, darker where a little depth remains. The fire laid for this evening is already there. Kindling set beneath 2 small logs, paper twisted and tucked, a larger piece waiting beyond them to be added later. The poker leans where it always leans, its handle blackened smooth where hands have taken it up again and again over the winters. The fender in front of the hearth has lost some of its finish at the center. the metal dulled by repeated brushing of boots and ash bucket. You do not light anything yet. The cottage is not warm because a story says it should be warm. It is only reached, not yet awakened, so instead you continue letting the room disclose itself in this in-between state. The kettle sits on the hob, its handle darkened at the grip, its lid slightly brighter where fingers have caught it most often. A small mineral bloom runs from the spout to the body in a pale line left by repeated boiling and cooling. On the table nearby, a mug waits upside down on a folded cloth. The rim has a tiny roughness on one side where the glaze has worn thinner from long use. A second chair, farther from the fire, keeps it straight back to the wall. The lamp on the shelf has not been lit, but its glass chimney already holds the dim room in a faint, curved reflection. You cross to the window and place your fingertips against the inside latch. The metal is cool, though not as cold as the gate. The glass above it carries a slight dimness at the corners where the indoor air has met the winter pane and softened there. Outside, the snow is still fine. It has not thickened into storm or haste. It simply continues, and by continuing it makes the cottage more necessary with every passing minute. A little of the world remains visible beyond it. Roofline, wall, gate, a strip of lane, the bare outline of a hedge where the land falls away. But already these are becoming less separate from one another. The snowfall is beginning to gather them into one softened exterior, just as the room behind you is still waiting to gather into one interior held by warmth and lamplight. You let the curtain fall back into place. The fabric is heavier at the lower edge where the hem has been turned twice and stitched. It hangs quietly, not enough to close the window off entirely, only enough to soften the cold shape of the glass and keep the room inward facing even before evening fully comes. When you turn back, the cottage has changed a little simply because you have entered it properly. The boots now stand on the mat, dark and dampening slowly at the edges. The coat hangs by the door. The key rests on its shelf. One chair carries the folded blanket. The hearth waits in readiness. None of these things was absent before, but now they belong to someone being here. The room has stopped being a winter room and started becoming your room within the winter. Not heat, recognition. The body no longer has any need to go farther than this. The lane has ended. The weather is outside. The cottage is reached. Its coolness no longer feels like exposure. It feels like the first stage of being inside something that will, in time, warm around you. A small sound comes from the window pane as snow touches and slips against it in the fine, dry way of early evening weather not yet turned to ice. Then nothing. Then the room again. Your hand rests briefly on the back of the chair nearest the hearth. The wood is smooth along the upper rail where it has been gripped often, a little rougher below where the grain rises again. The blanket folded over it is heavier than it looked from the doorway. One edge has thinned slightly along a long-used crease, and the wool keeps the faintest trace of old hearth smoke in it, not strong enough to be sent exactly, only enough to suggest years of being wrapped around shoulders within rooms just like this one. The kettle, the poker, the blanket, the chair, the coat by the door, the boots on the mat, the pale window with snow steadily softening the world beyond it. None of them is asking for admiration. They are not arranged for effect. They are here because a cottage in winter needs them, and because the body entering from the cold has begun to need them too. Outside, the snow continues. The lane beyond the gate is harder to read now. The wall keeps its line only at the top. The lower garden path has begun to take on a lighter cast where the flakes are no longer melting as quickly on the stone. The sky remains pale, but it has started its inward turn towards evening. Light has not gone. It has only begun to withdraw from the farthest things first. Inside, the room waits at exactly the right point in the cycle. Not empty, not warm, not dark, only ready. You stand still for a moment longer and let the house keep its present condition around you. The boards hold a little cold yet. The hearth has not opened into flame. The kettle has not begun its first quiet heat. The blanket is still folded. The lamp is still unlit. The upper stair remains only a shape leading out of sight. Everything that matters later is already here. Nothing has begun. And there, with the door shut against the weather, the last of the outdoor cold still resting lightly in the room, the snow outside steadily making the world smaller, and the cottage gathered around you in its waiting winter form, the next true act becomes clear at last, to make the house ready. You move toward the hearth because there is nothing else the cottage needs first. Not the lamp, not the blanket, not even the kettle, though that will matter soon. The room may already be shelter, but it is not yet warmth. That begins here, at the dark grate where yesterday's fire has gone fully to ash, and the next one waits in its laid, unlit form. You kneel. At this height, the hearth shows its details more clearly. The iron bars of the grate are dim with old heat and fine gray dust, brighter only at the edges where metal has been knocked clean by poker and shovel over many winters. Beneath them lies a shallow bed of ash, pale at the surface, and darker where it keeps a little depth. The paper tucked below the kindling has been twisted rather than folded, one corner already loosened. The thinner sticks cross one another lightly, enough space between them for air to pass. Behind them sit two logs set ready without fuss, their bark rough in places, cleaner where the wood was split. The fire was not left to be invented from nothing. It was left in waiting form. You reach for the poker. The handle is cooler than your hand and blackened smooth where it has been taken up most often. The iron shaft carries a slight bend near the hooked end, not damage, only the long set shape of repeated use. You lower it into the grate and draw yesterday's ash back by a few inches, enough to clear the front, and let the laid paper breathe more easily when the flame comes. The ash moves without resistance, lifting and settling in a dry hush. Beneath it, a deeper gray remains, finer than the surface layer, and faintly warmer in color, though no heat is left in it now. A small piece of half-burned wood lies off to one side, black and feather-light. You shift it back with the hook and let it rest where it will catch later if needed. One of the thinner sticks has rolled slightly from its place. You turn it with your fingers and lay it back against the others. The room remains cool around you while you do this. That matters. The cottage has not changed yet. It is only beginning to prepare itself for change. Behind you, the window keeps its pale weather light. Outside, the snow continues. You can feel it in the room even without looking. The muffled quality of the world remains at the pane, at the door, along the outer wall where winter still holds its place. But here, at floor level before the hearth, another logic has already begun to take over. Paper, kindling, ash, iron, draft, flame not yet present, but already implied. You strike the match. Its first light is sharper than anything else in the room, brief and concentrated, a small gold flare between fingers and paper. The sulfur rises cleanly, then is gone into the colder air above it. You lower the flame to the loosened edge of the twist beneath the kindling. The paper takes at once, not boldly, but with a quick inward brightness that runs along one fold, and then another before settling to a steadier burn. For a few moments, the fire is all trying. Paper darkens and curls in on itself. A small flame lifts between two kindling sticks, and then seems to lose confidence when it reaches the cooler wood above. The room does not change at once. Neither the boards nor the air accept the fire merely because a match has been struck. Fire has to persuade the house a little. It has to find its own way into the material that will hold it. You watch without intervening too soon. Another small flame catches lower down where the paper has fallen in on itself, and this one reaches more deeply into the kindling. A fine thread of smoke lifts, then hesitates at the front of the grate before the chimney begins to take it properly. The draft is there now, not strong, only enough that the smoke no longer hangs in the room, but turns and is drawn upward in a thin, sure stream. A first faint crack comes from one of the smaller sticks, then another, sharper, from nearer the center where the flame has found drier wood. The fire is not established yet, but it has stopped being hypothetical. There is now something in the grate that is warmer than the room around it, and the room begins, however slightly, to answer. You sit back on your heels and let the first few minutes happen. The paper burns down quickly, leaving a low brightness beneath the kindling, and the thin sticks begin to hold the flame more convincingly now that the chimney has chosen its direction. The orange at their edges is still light and provisional, but the color has changed. This is no longer match flame. It is wood flame, a more serious thing. A thing that can last. The iron at the front of the grate does not yet warm enough to be touched. The hearthstone does not yet release anything into the room. But already the eye reads the place differently. Where there had been dark iron and old ash, there is now a center. One of the small logs shifts slightly as the kindling below settles. The sound is contained, and low, not the collapse of anything, only the house's first acknowledgement that the fire has begun its work. A pale line of old ash loosens and falls inward. The nearer log catches first along one roughened edge where the bark has already split back from the wood beneath. The flame licks at it, loses hold, returns, finds another point, and remains there. You lift the poker again and ease one of the smaller sticks a little closer in. Not much. Just enough to help contact where contact is needed. The iron scrapes lightly against the grate, then against wood. A spark lifts and vanishes almost before it is seen. The kindling resettles. This time the flame answers more surely, moving upward in two joined tongues instead of one. The room is still cool. The front of your knees can feel that. The backs of your hands can feel it too where they are not close to the grate. But the hearth has stopped merely waiting. It is beginning to act. You set the poker back in its place. The hook meets the stone lip beside the grate with a small contact that belongs to the house as naturally as the latch belonged to the door. Everything here has its sound. None of it needs to be exaggerated. Now the kettle. You rise and cross the few steps to the hob. The kettle is heavier in the hand than it looked from across the room. Not heavy enough to register as effort, only enough to make its reality clear. The handle carries a dark smoothness where fingers have taken it most often. The lid sits with that slight loose exactness old kettles have when they know their own shape well enough not to need tightness. You carry it to the sink. The pump handle lifts cool beneath your palm. The first movement draws only a hollow answer through the pipe. The second brings water, cold, clear, metallic in sound against the kettle's inner base before the depth rises enough to soften it. You do not fill the kettle to the brim, only to the level the house and evening will need. The lid goes back on with a small seated click, not neat enough to sound precise, only familiar enough to sound right. When you set it on the hob, it alters the whole hearth arrangement by one quiet degree. The fire is not alone now. The room has another future sound waiting inside it. You turn the mug upright on the table. Its glaze is slightly thinned where a thumb has rested against it often. The inside carries a faint tea-colored shadow low along one side that no washing has ever quite removed. Beside it, the folded cloth is softened at the corners from repeated rinsing and drying. A spoon rests in the shallow dish near the sugar jar, its bowl brighter than its handle where use has polished one more than the other. None of this asks for ceremony. It asks only to be used in the order winter evenings require. The fire answers again behind you with a deeper crack. this one from the first small log properly catching at last. When you turn back, the flames have altered shape. They no longer move only among the kindling. They are finding the wood that will sustain them. One section of bark has blackened and curled away. A line of brighter orange now runs under the nearer log, and the chimney has taken the smoke fully. What rises from the grate now is warmth more than smell, though a faint, dry trace of wood, an old hearth remains in the air nearest the fire. You bring the chair a little closer. Not close enough to idle in heat, only close enough that when sitting later, the body will not have to stretch towards what the room has already made available. The chair legs move over the boards with a soft wooden drag. One catches slightly where the floorboard edge lifts a fraction higher than the next, then passes over it. The blanket remains folded over the back. You touch it once only to shift its weight more evenly, so it will not slide when the chair is moved. Already the hearth side of the room has begun to divide itself from the rest. The boards nearest the grate still hold their coolness, but less absolutely. The air above the hearth is rising now. You can feel that when you stand up from placing the chair, not as full warmth, but as a subtle loosening of the room's first chill. The corners remain untouched by it. The shelf by the door remains in the same winter quiet where the key lies. The coat still hangs cool. The boots by the mat are still dark with damp at the edges. But the house has a center now, and that center is beginning to work outward. You go to the window and draw the curtain more fully. The rings run along the rod with two soft catches where the metal has roughened over time. The fabric comes across the pane in a heavier fall than before, not shutting out the day entirely, but narrowing it. What remains visible now is less the lane itself than its softened brightness through cloth and glass, the knowledge of weather rather than the full reading of it. Outside, the snow continues. The room answers by turning inward another degree. The lamp remains unlit on its shelf, but now it belongs less to the afternoon than to the evening approaching. The table is no longer simply furniture. It has mug, spoon, cloth. The chair no longer waits by the hearth. It has been chosen. The blanket is no longer just part of the room's shape. It is within reach. Behind you, the kettle begins the first smallest sign of change. Not sound yet exactly, more a different presence. The metal receives heat in silence at first, but the stillness around it changes. The body knows this long before water announces itself. The kettle is now in the same state the fire was in several minutes ago. No longer merely an object, but a process. You kneel once more at the grate and add the larger piece of wood. The log settles across the brighter heart of the fire with a deeper contact than the kindling made. The flames disappear briefly beneath the shift, then return at the underside where the new weight has not crushed them fully out. This is another moment that must not be hurried. Fire likes sequence. It likes being given one thing at the right time rather than three things at once in hope. You watch the new arrangement settle. One edge blackens first. The smaller log behind it glows where heat has already entered more deeply. A little light moves across the iron bars and withdraws again. The room around the grate is no longer neutral. When you rise from kneeling, the fronts of your hands meet a different air from the backs. The hearth has begun to establish a direction. The cottage feels this too. The boards just before the fire now give back a little dry warmth through the soles. The underside of the table nearest the grate holds a dim orange suggestion where before it held only winter light. The curtain, once only a practical boundary, now helps keep the room collected around its growing center. Even the coat by the door has begun to look like an outer thing, something already one phase removed from you. You take the mug and set it nearer the hearth, not because it must be there, but because evenings in small winter houses tend to gather objects toward the same source. Flame, chair, blanket, kettle, hand. The spoon follows. The sugar jar remains where it is for now, one object further back, not yet needed. At last the kettle speaks, only in the smallest way. A tiny contained click from the metal as it adjusts to heat, then stillness. Then, after some moments, another quieter one, more felt than heard. It is enough. The second domestic system has joined the first. Fire and kettle now keep the room together between them. The snow at the window can no longer be read in separate movement. It has become one exterior continuance. Now, and then a finer flurry touches the pane in a way the ear can half register. But mostly what it does is alter the world beyond the glass into something less exact and less needed. The lane has gone further from the room than the number of steps between them would suggest. Winter evenings do that too. They turn outside into weather and inside into place. You sit. The chair receives you with a small known creak along one joint of the back where timber answers wait before settling under it. The blanket remains over the chair back a moment longer. The body does not need it yet, though the thought of it has already entered the room. Before you, the fire has stopped trying and begun burning properly. The flames no longer search among paper and kindling for somewhere to live. They have found wood and are moving through it. The kettle rests above them in patient silence, but not for much longer. The first true hearthside condition has arrived. Not full comfort, not evening complete, only the point at which the house can now carry the rest of the night forward. Outside, the snow continues. Inside, the fire has taken. The kettle is in motion. The chair is chosen. The blanket is near. The curtain is drawn. The boots begin to dry by the door. The coat hangs without weather in it now except what little remains in the hem. The cottage is no longer merely reached. It is ready, and there, with the hearth established. The first heat beginning to work itself into iron, kettle, board, and air, and the snow outside quietly making the rest of the world less immediate, the room crosses its first inward threshold at last. The house is awake, and evening can begin. You sit because the room has reached the point where sitting belongs to it. Not the waiting stillness of before the fire was lit, not the practical kneeling and rising of making the house ready. Something different now. The chair has already been drawn close enough to the hearth that no further adjustment is needed. The fire has moved beyond trying and into its steadier work. The kettle rests above it with its first task nearly complete. The blanket hangs where your hand can find it without searching. The curtain has been drawn far enough that the window no longer gives the lane away in full. The room, without saying so, has arranged itself into evening. You lower yourself into the chair. The wood answers at once with the small contained sound it gave earlier when moved across the boards, only deeper now under full weight. One joint in the back acknowledges you first, then settles. The seat has a familiar firmness to it, not softened by cushions or made to disappear under the body, only used enough that it receives you in the shape it has learned over time. One arm is smoother than the other where a hand has rested more often. The blanket, still folded over the chair back, presses lightly against your shoulder before slipping a little with the motion and coming to rest again. For a few moments you do nothing except remain there. The body is close enough to the fire now that the air changes clearly from one part of you to another. The fronts of the hands receive warmth first, then the knees, then the lower part of the face if you incline it slightly toward the grate. The rest of the room remains cooler, though no longer with the still, untouched coolness it held when you first stepped inside. That earlier cold has been interrupted, broken into sections. Near the hearth, the cottage has one temperature. At the table, another. By the door, another still. The house is no longer one condition. It has begun to gather warmth inwards from a center. The fire itself has changed shape since you last looked at it closely. The kindling has collapsed into the larger work of the wood now. One of the first small logs carries a clear seam of brightness along its underside, and behind it the newer piece has begun to blacken and open in narrow lines where the flame has found its grain. What was quick and searching before has become slower and more certain. The flame rises in broader movements now, not in little tries and catches, but in steadier upward tongues that know where they are going. Every so often a small sound comes from within the wood, a contained crack, a soft shift, a bright inward settling, and then the whole grate resumes its deeper burning again. You draw the blanket down. Its weight is greater than the first light touch of it suggested. The wool falls across your knees in one quiet fold, then another. One edge comes higher over your lap where the fabric has been doubled and thinned slightly by repeated use. The warmth it offers is not separate from the room's warmth. It belongs to the same system now: fire, chair, wool, held air, body. One practical winter thing answering another. The kettle gives the first true sign that it is ready. Not the small clicks of metal taking heat this time, but a deeper interior sound, faint and rounded, as water begins to move more fully inside it. The lid shifts by a fraction against its seat. Then stillness. Then the same low movement again. You rise just enough from the chair to reach it comfortably, lift it from the hob, and feel the difference in its weight, not the difference of fullness, but of heat. Steam does not burst from it. It lifts cleanly in one narrow breath and disperses at once into the cooler part of the room above the fire. You pour. The water meets the mug in a quiet, rushing curve, and at once the room alters by another small degree. The cup that was merely ready has become warm in the hand. The spoon that lay beside it is lifted, used, set down again with a light sound against the saucer's edge. Steam rises between you and the fire, visible only for a few seconds before it loses itself in the dimmer air beyond the hearth. The kettle is returned to the hob, not empty, not full, simply quieter now that one part of its purpose has been fulfilled. You settle again into the chair. The mug fits the hands naturally. One thumb finds the same thinned patch in the glaze it would have found any other evening. The heat is stronger than the fire's first warmth was, but more contained. It belongs to the hands and chest rather than the room. The first sip carries that same contained heat inward. Nothing in it is elaborate. Tea, water, mug, winter room, fire. A house becomes itself most convincingly not when things in it are admired, but when they begin to be used in the right order. The fire burns, the kettle heats, the mug warms the hands, the blanket settles, the chair holds. The room gathers inward around those acts and becomes evening almost without announcing it. Outside, the snow continues. This time, when you turn your head toward the window, the world beyond it is noticeably less available than it was before. The curtain and the fading light are doing part of that work, but the snow is doing more. The lane beyond the gate no longer presents itself in separate readable distances. The wall remains only at its upper line. The hedge is a darkened mass with pale gathering at its outer edge. What had earlier been a garden path is now a lighter suggestion between the door and the gate. The world has not disappeared. It has simply withdrawn from detail. In the glass, the room has started to answer back. Not clearly enough yet for reflection to replace what is outside, but enough that firelight and the dim shape of the chair begin to hold themselves against the whitening pane. This is one of winter evening's quiet changes. The room no longer looks through the window only. It begins to meet itself there. You drink again. The mug cools by degrees where your fingers do not touch it and remains hot where they do. The blanket gathers more naturally over your knees now that the body has settled into one position. The fire no longer requires watching in order to trust it. It has crossed into the stage where it can be lived beside. Every now and then a flame folds inward as one section of wood gives way. Every now and then the brighter seam beneath a log shifts its place by a fraction. None of that asks anything from you. The room has reached its first true evening rhythm. The kettle, cooling a little on the hob, still gives off the faintest thread of heat. The table now holds the mug cloth, the spoon, the sugar jar no longer merely waiting, but part of an arrangement already entered. The boots by the door have lost some of their wet sheen. The hem of the coat on the peg hangs straighter than before now that the snow along it has melted or dried into the wool. Even the mat has changed, the darker ovals left by your soles having spread and softened into the weave. These things matter, not one by one, together. The daylight weakens another degree. It is not dramatic enough to call dimming, more a surrender of authority. The fire has become stronger than the window in shaping the room, and once that happens, everything else changes character with it. The lower boards take on a warmer tone nearest the hearth. The underside of the table is touched by orange rather than pale winter gray. The curtain no longer reads as fabric against a pane, but as part of the boundary that keeps the room inward. The chair opposite, the one farther from the fire, has receded from use and become part of the room's shape again. You set the mug down for a moment and reach toward the lamp. Its chimney is faintly clouded near the top with the old smoke of previous evenings. The brass at its base is brighter where fingers have turned the wick wheel most often. You lift it from the shelf, trim the wick a fraction, strike a match, and light it without ceremony. The flame inside the glass rises more sharply at first than the fire below, then settles into a contained amber steadiness once the chimney is lowered back into place. The room changes again. Firelight and lamplight are not the same thing. The fire moves, the lamp stays. The fire throws shape upward and outward in living alteration. The lamp gathers a smaller certainty around itself and lets the farther parts of the room keep their shadow without disappearing entirely. The table near it comes forward. The shelf behind it regains its objects in clearer outline. The curtain hem, the mug rim, the edge of the chair arm, the fold of the blanket over your knees. All of them now exist in relation to two light sources instead of one. This is the point where the cottage stops belonging to afternoon altogether. Whatever daylight remains beyond the curtain belongs to weather now, not to the room. Inside, evening has taken over. You draw the blanket a little higher, not because you are cold, but because the room has reached the point at which the body answers it by accepting more of it. The blanket comes over one shoulder now as well as your knees. The chair receives the small shift in weight and settles again. The fire remains the deeper center of the room, but the lamp has given the evening its edges. Between them, the cottage is complete enough for the night to happen inside it without resistance. Outside, the snow continues, but it has stopped being something to consult. At first, the snow was weather met in the lane. Then it was weather kept on the far side of a door. Then it was weather watched through a curtain-softened window. Now it has become continuity. The world beyond the glass is no longer asking to be read in any exact way. It is enough to know that the snowfall remains, and that because it remains, the room becomes more itself with every passing minute. The fire settles deeper into the logs. A piece shifts inward and sends a brief shower of orange up through the grate before the sparks vanish. The sound of it is low and contained, more like the room speaking to itself than like an event. The kettle, no longer the next thing to happen, has gone quiet again. The lamp flame holds steady in its glass. The mug, half finished now, keeps a smaller warmth at the bottom than it did at first. The house has nothing to prove from here. It only needs to go on. You look once more toward the window. The lane has gone almost entirely. Not into darkness yet, but into weather. What remains visible is a pale collective brightness where snow and evening have met and removed detail between them. The window keeps that outer condition at the edge of the room without letting it take the room back. The cottage has won that contest now, not by force, by accumulation. Fire, kettle, chair, blanket, lamp, curtain, used objects settling into their evening places. Small acts completed in the right order. The body feels it too. There is no desire to stand again without reason. No part of you is still half in the lane, half near the door, half waiting for the room to become what it promised it might become. It already has. The warmth at the hands and knees is established. The blanket's weight is familiar. The fire no longer needs tending this very minute. The lamp has taken over the corners. The world outside has withdrawn into snow and early dark. The room is enough. For a little while longer, you remain where you are and let that be true. The mug is finished. The spoon lies still. The table keeps its small evening order. Near the door, the boots continue drying by degrees, and the coat holds no weather in it now except what memory the fabric keeps. The upper stair remains where it has always been, quiet and unused so far this evening, but no longer merely part of the room's shape. It has started to gather another possibility around itself. Not yet, that belongs later. For now, the cottage is complete downstairs. The fire keeps its slow, bright work. The lamp keeps its contained amber field. The blanket keeps its weight over your lap and shoulder. Outside, the snow goes on making the rest of the world less immediate. And there, with the firelit room now fully gathered inward, the weather beyond the window softened almost beyond reading, and the house no longer simply protecting you from winter, but becoming the whole evening itself. The cottage reaches its next true condition at last. The downstairs world is complete, and the night can begin to move upward. For a little while longer, you remain where you are, letting the downstairs room hold its full evening shape around you. The mug has been finished and left on the table. The spoon lies still beside it. The kettle keeps a lower, quieter warmth on the hob. The fire has settled into the deeper part of its work, no longer needing the same active attention it did earlier. The blanket has gathered its weight over your knees and one shoulder. The lamp has given the room its nearer edges. Outside, the snow continues, but only as a softened fact at the curtain and pane. Nothing downstairs is unfinished. That is why you can leave it, not because the warmth has lessened, not because the room has failed in any way, only because it has completed what it needed to become. The evening below has reached the point where it can go on holding itself without your full presence at its center. You lift the blanket from your lap and fold it once, not neatly, only enough to let it rest again over the chair back without slipping. The chair answers with the same known sound as your weight leaves it. The table keeps the mug and spoon where you set them. The kettle remains where it is, a little nearer silence now than heat. The fire goes on in the grate, one low settling sound now, and then from the wood, one shift of orange under the darkening logs, enough to show that it is alive and carrying the room forward. You take up the lamp. Its handle is warmer near the base than at the top where the metal rises away from the chimney. The glass keeps its contained glow without trembling. When you lift it from the shelf, the room alters at once. The chair behind you loses some of its shape. The farther wall recedes. The table remains lit only at its nearer edge where the lamp passes. The fire does not disappear, but it stops governing the whole room by itself. You are carrying part of the evening upward now, and the room knows it. At the foot of the stair, you pause once, lamp in hand, and look back. The downstairs world remains complete, the chair by the hearth. The blanket returned to its place. The table with its small use-made order. The curtain holding the weather at the window. The boots drying by the door. The coat hanging without cold in it now. And at the center, the fire, lower and deeper than before, but still enough to keep the room inward. It is good to leave a room only when it has become fully itself. Then you turn and place your hand on the stair rail. The wood is smoother along the upper curve where hands have found it over years of going up in the evening and down again in the morning. Lower down, where fingers do not naturally rest, the grain lifts more clearly. The stair itself narrows the house without making it feel tight. One tread gives a faint, contained sound under your weight. The next is firmer. A runner lies along the center, pressed flatter where feet have passed most often, its pattern worn less at the edges than through the middle. The lamp moves with you. Its light travels up the wall in a quiet oval, revealing one turn of the banister, the next tread, the seam between wall and skirting, then giving them back to shadow as you climb. The house sounds different here than it did by the hearth. Downstairs, the fire had a room to itself. Here on the stair, you hear the whole cottage differently. The fire remains present, but lower now, not in sight, only in the faintest suggestion of warmth rising through the center of the house and the occasional low sound from the grate below. Around that are other quieter truths. The old boards underfoot, the stillness of the landing above, the winter night at the windows held outside the walls. You climb one step, then another. The air changes by small degrees as you rise. Not sharply cooler, only less touched by the hearth. The warmth from below reaches the stairway in a softened version of itself, enough to prove the house is held, not enough to make the upper floor the same place as the room you have left. That difference is right. Bedrooms in winter houses have their own logic. They are not warmed first by fire, but by bed, blanket, body, and the slow gathering of night around them. Halfway up, you pause and look down once. The lower room is now mostly glow, fire, and lamp memory at the edge of sight, not details. The stair makes the house feel taller than it seemed from below. Not larger exactly, more complete. It has a lower warmth and an upper quiet. It has places where evening is lived openly, and places where it narrows itself towards sleep. You go on. At the landing, the boards sound softer under the runner. The wall here keeps a different temperature too, neither as cool as the door-side boards had been earlier, nor as warm as the hearth-side floor below. The lamp reveals a peg with nothing hanging from it, a small framed print faded enough that only its darker shapes remain clear, a narrow table with a folded cloth, and a bowl resting in the center. These things are not introduced as ornaments. They belong to passage and pause to the part of the house where one room becomes another. The bedroom door opens with less weight than the front door did. Its latch gives inward more easily, and the room beyond receives the lamp in a gentler way than the downstairs room received daylight or fire. The first thing you notice is not the bed. It is the air. Cooler here, not cold enough to resist you, only untouched by the direct work of the hearth. The room has been waiting in winter quiet, and that waiting remains in the coverlet, the washstand, the rug at the side of the bed, the small dark window with its curtain drawn only partway. The lamp does not fill the room, so much as choose what part of it will belong to you first. You step inside. The bed stands under the sloping part of the wall, where the ceiling lowers slightly toward the outer edge of the house. The quilt across it is smoother at the center than the sides, where the stitching has risen in faint ridges over time. One corner near the foot lies a little flatter than the rest, as though often folded back from that same side. The pillow carries the gentlest settled hollow, not visible at once, but clear when the lamp is set lower, and the cloth shadow shows its shape. Beside the bed, the small table has a ring at one corner where a mug has stood more than once. The wash jug on the stand keeps a pale mineral crescent inside the glaze just below the lip. A brush lies turned with its bristles inward, where it was last set down. Nothing in the room has been arranged for effect. That is why the room can be entered so easily. You set the lamp on the bedside table. Its glow gathers the nearest things and leaves the rest to softer darkness. The edge of the quilt, the turned wood leg of the bed, the wash jug's shoulder, the curtain hem, the chair in the corner where tomorrow's clothes might lie, though nothing rests there now. The bedroom does not become cozy in one movement any more than the downstairs room did. It has to become inhabited. You go first to the window. The curtain, heavier at the bottom where the hem has taken years of hanging, draws the pane inward more than it closes it off. When you shift one side back a little, the glass gives you very little of the world in return. The snow has done its work. What remains outside is not lane or hedge or wall in any clear arrangement, only a diffuse pale dark field where night and snowfall have met and softened each other. Here upstairs, the weather is farther away than it was below, not because distance has changed, but because the bedroom has no need of detail from outside. The cottage walls keep their own weather now. You let the curtain fall again. The room deepens around the bed as soon as you do. Downstairs, the chair and hearth had become the center. Here, it is not the room itself that first takes on that role, but the bed within it. A winter bedroom can wait in coolness as long as it needs to, because what makes it habitable is not room temperature alone. It is cover, linen, pillow, mattress, the small pool of lamplight, the knowledge that the house below is holding together through fire and closed doors and snow-softened dark. You turn back the quilt. The underside is cooler than the upper fabric kept in the room's still air. The sheet beneath is cooler again, but cleanly so, with none of the hard chill of outdoor linen. It has the smooth, dry feel of bedding that has been waiting properly. One edge of the top sheet has been folded back over the blanket below it, not sharply, just enough to make getting in easier. The eiderdown beneath the quilt carries more weight at the foot than at the shoulder, the filling settled by use into the places where it is asked most often to rest. You sit on the edge of the bed. The mattress receives you honestly. It does not sink far, nor remain rigid. One place yields, then steadies. The rope-supported firmness beneath the surface makes itself known without discomfort. The bed is not made to vanish under the body. It is made to hold it through a long winter night and be trusted to do so every time. You reach to remove what remains of the outer day. Shoes first, set beside the rug with their toes turned slightly inward by habit. Then stockings, the skin beneath them meeting the cooler room air for a moment before the bedding takes over. The bed remains turned back, waiting in simple layers. Sheet, blanket, down, quilt. Not luxury. Sufficiency. The kind that matters more. When at last you draw your legs up and bring the covers over them, the bedroom begins its own version of warming. Not in the room. In the bed. The sheet first, cool, smooth, brief in its contrast. Then the layer beneath and above, holding that coolness in place only long enough for the body to answer it. The blanket over the knees. The down settling at the lower legs and then the hips. The quilt with its heavier outer weight completing the arrangement. This is another system altogether from the fire downstairs. No flame, no iron, no kettle, no glowing center in the room. Only body heat meeting layered cloth and beginning the slower winter work of making a bed your own for the night. You shift a little lower. The pillow receives your head with the slight familiar give already shaped into it. One edge is cooler than the place where the lamp has warmed the cloth faintly from a distance. The cover is smoother near the center than at the seam. The mattress holds through shoulder, side, thigh in one steadier line now that your weight has stopped arriving and begun to rest. Below, the house makes itself known differently from here. You cannot see the fire, but you no longer need to. Once or twice, there comes the faintest low movement from the hearth below. Wood settling in on itself, not loudly enough to become a sound in its own right, only enough to remind the rest of the cottage that warmth continues in the room under this one. Between those moments, there is the house itself, boards holding, wall and stair, and landing gathered into one shape around you. The winter night kept outside in its snow-muted distance. The lamp does what the fire could not have done from below. It gathers the bed. Its glow reaches the turned-back quilt edge, the bedside table, the jug and bowl, the nearest fold of curtain, and not much more. The room beyond that remains present but uninsistent. The corner chair can still be found if looked for. The washstand keeps its shape. The floor beyond the rug is only partly lit. The bedroom is not dark and not bright. It is at the right stage of evening for lying still while the rest of the house takes up its own night shape. You draw the quilt a little higher. At once the room loses more of its importance than the bed does. That is the right order. The lamp remains on, but the bed has become the first world now. Sheet, blanket, down, quilt, pillow, body. Around that, the house. Around the house, snowfall and winter night. Outside, the snow continues. You know this not because you can see it clearly, but because the world beyond the curtain remains so softened and unreadable that no other explanation is needed. The outside has become less a scene than a condition. The same is becoming true of the cottage. It is no longer a set of rooms held separately in awareness. It is stair, landing, bedroom, lower hearth, outer walls, roof under snow, all one winter structure now carrying you toward the later hours. The lamp flame is lowered a fraction. Its amber field contracts slightly. The table edge darkens. The wash jug keeps only one line of light along its shoulder. The bed remains visible enough in all the ways that matter. This is not darkness yet, only the room entering another degree of night. The body feels that too. There is no wish now to rise and tend anything else. The downstairs room has already been left in order. The fire below can carry itself a while. The kettle has done what it needed. The mug is finished. The chair by the hearth remains where it was left. Everything below has reached its evening form. Everything here above has reached its first night form. The house has closed gently around you. Not sleep yet, not deep night yet. Only the bed entered, the lamp lowered, the room inhabited, the whole cottage held in one winter condition from hearth below to snow beyond the roof. You lie a little deeper into the mattress and let the arrangement make itself more complete by not resisting it. The pillow keeps its shape. The quilt settles further at the shoulder and side. The room stays cooler than the bed. The house stays larger than the room. The night stays beyond the house in snow and soft dark. And there, with the evening no longer simply a downstairs firelit room, but a whole cottage gathered floor by floor around the body, with bed and bedding now taking over from chair and blanket, and with the outside world reduced to weather and pale obscurity beyond the curtain, you are upstairs in bed, and the deep night of the house can begin. For a while, nothing more is required than remaining where you are. The bed has already done its first work. The sheet is no longer newly cool. The blanket and quilt have settled into their places over the body. The pillow has accepted the weight of your head without needing further arrangement. The room remains what it was, lamp lowered, curtain drawn, the bed now the center of everything that matters. But already that arrangement is beginning to simplify. The lamp stands on the bedside table with its flame turned low. Its glow is enough to keep the nearest things from disappearing entirely. The edge of the quilt, the line of the table, the shoulder of the wash jug, the curtain fold nearest the sill. Beyond that, the room has begun to yield itself to night. The chair in the corner is no longer something you could describe from where you lie without first deciding to look at it. The rug at the bedside keeps its place only where the lamp catches one border. The wall above the bed holds no texture now, only tone. The body does not need more than that. Below, somewhere beyond floorboards, stair, and the room you left behind, the fire still exists. You do not see it. You do not need to. Once or twice, there comes the faintest low answer from beneath the house, a quiet settling in the grate, a muted inward shift of wood giving way to its own slower burning. Not a sound that asks to be named. Only proof that the lower warmth has not gone out altogether. The fire below is no longer an active center. It has become part of the structure now, one lower heldness beneath the bed and bedroom, keeping the house inward from below in the same way the roof and outer walls keep the snow from it on every side. The lamp flame narrows once, then steadies again. You watch it only long enough to know that it will go on holding a little while if left like this. Its light no longer feels like an evening light. It feels like the last deliberate light before the room belongs more fully to the house and the house more fully to the night. Outside, the snow continues. The curtain gives almost nothing of the world away now. No lane, no wall, no garden path. Only a dim pale dark behind the fabric. Enough to say that the world beyond the cottage remains, but not enough to make it readable. Snow has finished its earlier work of softening detail. Now it does another kind of work entirely. It erases distance. It removes the outside world from active use. It leaves the house surrounded, not threatened, simply held apart. You reach one hand from beneath the blanket and lower the lamp a little more. The room changes at once, but quietly. The wash jug loses the small line of brightness it had kept at its shoulder. The curtain becomes a darker fall rather than a folded object. The table remains where you know it is, but its edge is no longer visible all the way to the corner. The bed does not disappear with the room. It grows truer. Quilt, pillow, body, sheet, the warmer place under the covers where your legs have already altered the bed from waiting object to inhabited one, these remain. Everything else takes one measured step back. Night in a winter room should not announce itself by darkness alone. It should arrive by reducing what still needs to be seen. For a few moments longer, the lamp remains lit in this smaller state. The flame is now only enough to gather a narrow amber field beside the bed. It no longer competes with the darkness in the room. It lives inside it. The body, already settled, no longer depends on it. The room, already entered, no longer depends on it either. The lamp's final work is not illumination. It is transition. Below, the house answers with one faint sound from its lower timber, a small contained tick, then nothing. Not the clock of the bell tower, not a repeated measure. Only winter wood adjusting as the colder night settles more fully outside the walls and the deeper house warmth continues to ease upward from below. A house at night has this kind of life. Not active, not restless, only the occasional proof that it remains made of things that answer the hour in their own quiet ways. You lower the lamp again. The flame contracts. For a moment it sharpens rather than dims, then steadies lower still. The glass chimney holds a last small oval of amber against its curve. Then the room beyond that oval gives itself over another degree to dark. The bed remains. The pillow keeps its shape. The quilt keeps its weight. The room no longer needs to stand visibly around you in order to keep being the room. At last, you turn the flame down until it goes. The dark that follows is not full darkness. The curtain keeps a pale suggestion of the snow-muted world beyond it. The window itself is no longer seen, so much as understood. The bed still holds its edges through touch rather than sight. The ceiling, the chair, the washstand, the door, these do not vanish. They recede into house dark, the kind that belongs to familiar rooms when no more is required of them. The withdrawal of light does not break the room. It simplifies it. This is where the cottage begins to change from a set of used evening objects into one deeper held condition. The table is no longer mug, spoon, jug, lamp. It is only the bedside region of the room. The stair is no longer tread, and rail, and landing. It is the house below you. The fire is no longer flame in a grate. It is warmth remembered through floorboards and the occasional low movement from another level. The curtain is no longer fabric at a pane. It is the edge of the weathered dark. The house stops presenting itself in parts. It begins to hold together. You lie within that without needing to help it. There is no reason now to move the pillow, test the quilt, or reconsider the line of your shoulder against the mattress. That work is done. The body is not negotiating with the bed any longer. It is being held by it. The same is becoming true of the house. A faint lower sound comes from beneath again, so low it might almost be mistaken for the memory of one, if not for the slight answering awareness it produces in the boards and walls around you. The embers below are settling further into themselves. No flame need be seen for that to be known. The cottage carries ember presence differently from firelight. Firelight announces. Embers persist. They no longer define the house visually. They define it structurally as something still warm at the center even when rooms above have gone dark. This gives the cottage its layered feeling now. Bed nearest, room around the bed, the stair and lower floor beyond the room, the embers below, the walls and roof beyond all of that, and outside the roof, the snowfall continuing in its own quiet measure through the night. The house holds these layers without asking you to map them precisely. You know them because you are already inside them. For a while, there is no sound at all, or none worth separating from the whole. That interval matters. It is not an absence between events. It is the deep house condition itself, the kind of held quiet in which even a very small sound, if it comes, will not feel like interruption, only like part of what it means for the cottage to continue being alive around sleeping rooms. Then one does come. A board somewhere in the lower part of the house answers the cold with a single quiet note. It does not repeat. It resolves itself completely in the moment it arrives. After it, the silence of the house is not emptier than before. It is fuller. The sound has not broken anything. It has proved that the silence here belongs to a built place, not to vacancy. Outside, the snow continues, still not as separate flakes or visible motion, only as the sustained unreadability beyond the curtain. The world outside the cottage is now reduced to one condition: white dark, snow softened, winter held. No path can be followed there from bed. No detail could improve the body's rest even if it were available. Snow has completed its work now. It has removed the need for the outside world to remain legible. This leaves the house more complete. No lane to think about. No horizon to imagine. No changing weather to monitor. Only the cottage holding against it, and the bed holding within the cottage. The body begins to feel the difference between these layers less sharply. The quilt remains heavier at the foot than higher up where it crosses the hips and shoulder. The pillow remains cooler at one edge than at the place under the head. The room remains cooler than the bed, and the house beyond the room cooler still in certain outer parts. These differences do not vanish. They simply stop requiring active registration. The body no longer needs to refresh them each time awareness brushes against them. They become part of one broader heldness. That is how deep night begins to earn itself, not by making everything the same, but by making the distinctions less useful. Another long interval passes. No ember sound below. No board tick in the wall. No shift from the window that the ear can make use of. Only the bed and the house continuing to hold their own arrangements in silence. Then, much later, or perhaps not very much later, time is beginning to lose its sharper edges here. The faintest inward settling sounds again from below. Not the fire taking new wood, not flame. Only the slow interior answer of what remains after flame has done its brighter work. The embers are still there. The lower room is still being kept. The house does not cool all at once from the center outward. It releases evening in longer measures than that. You do not need to turn toward the sound. It belongs to the structure already. That is the beauty of a house once it enters its deep night. Its small continuances do not require witness to remain reassuring. The bed has altered again without any action from you, not because it has become softer, because it has become more exact. The place where your body lies is now no longer the bed in general. It is your place within it. The pillow accepted, the lower sheet no longer cool, the quilt's weight now familiar enough to disappear into function. Even the mattress, which had been readable through shoulder, side, and hip when you first laid down, has withdrawn from specific notice into simple support. The room above that bed is doing the same. The chair in the corner, if it is still consciously known at all, is no longer chair as object. It is just the farther side of the room. The washstand is no longer bowl and jug. It is the dim region opposite the bed. The curtain no longer hangs. It is simply where the weathered dark begins. The cottage is sleeping into one shape around you. Not more quiet, not more comfort, but less separation. Less need to keep bed, room, stair, lower fire, roof, and snow distinct from one another. They are all still there. Yet the house has become one sleeping structure instead of a collection of named things. The intervals now matter more than the sounds. A faint ember settling below is real because it emerges from a long-held stretch of house dark in which nothing at all has asked to be noticed. A timber note in the wall would be real for the same reason. The sounds are small. The intervals make them deep. That is what the cottage offers at this hour. Not silence, but enough sustained quiet for the smallest continuances to feel natural, unthreatening, and complete. The body has no wish to move. Motion has lost its usefulness. Nothing waits to be improved. If the shoulder shifted, the house would not become more night. If the quilt were adjusted, the bed would not become more trustworthy. The active evening systems have withdrawn one by one. The outside world is almost gone now in every way that matters. The snow beyond the curtain no longer even feels like something falling. It feels like a condition that has already completed itself around the house. Whatever movement the weather still has belongs to the world at a distance from you. What reaches the bedroom is only its result. A softened night, a muffled dark, a cottage held inside white weather. That is why the house can feel so complete. It is not merely closed against winter. It has been gradually made central by winter, room by room, act by act, object by object, until this deep night hour when the body no longer has to distinguish much between house holding and bed holding at all. The embers below sound once more, very faintly, then not again for a long time. The memory of their warmth is now doing more work than the sound itself. The lower room remains part of the house body, but no longer as visible evening, no longer even as strongly audible night. It has passed into reassurance. A fire once made, a warmth still continuing, a downstairs world already completed, and now carrying its share of the night without help. You lie above that in bed, and the whole cottage lies under the roof in snow. There is almost nothing left to follow. The lamp is gone. The evening tasks are gone. The visible room is mostly gone. The world beyond the curtain is gone into white dark. Even the embers below are now more remembered than heard. What remains is the house at its deepest settled point. The bed holds. The room holds. The lower warmth holds. The outer dark holds. The snow continues its unreadable work around the walls. A final small sound comes from somewhere in the house, not below, not exactly beside you, only somewhere within the timbered body of the cottage where night and cooling meet. It is so slight it barely establishes itself as event before it resolves again into the larger held condition. After that, nothing, or nothing worth separating. And there, with the lamp withdrawn, the downstairs fire reduced to ember memory, the outside world softened almost completely out of use by snowfall and dark, and the whole cottage no longer presenting itself in rooms and objects, but as one sleeping structure carrying the body through its deepest winter hour. The house has settled as far as it can, and the next thing it will eventually become is morning. There comes a point in the night when darkness stops deepening. It does not lighten yet. It does not loosen into morning. It simply reaches the farthest point of itself and remains there for a while without going farther. You notice the change first not by sight, but by the room. The house no longer feels as sealed as it did in the deepest stretch of night. The coolness remains, but differently now. It is no longer gathering. It is simply there. The bed still holds its own warmth beneath the quilt. The pillow still keeps the shape of your head. The room still lies mostly beyond sight. Yet the darkness around these things has changed from something complete into something waiting to be changed. For a while longer, almost nothing follows from that. No light yet at the curtain. No distinct sound from outside. Only the knowledge, faint as breath in winter air, that the night has carried itself as far as it needs to go. The cottage feels this too. The house remains quiet, but not with the same depth of inwardness as before. In the deepest hour, bed, room, stair, lower hearth, roof, and snowfall had nearly ceased to stand apart. Now the first smallest separations begin to return, not because the body asks for them, only because time has altered the dark enough for the cottage to begin becoming itself again. The curtain is the first thing to reappear, not clearly, only as a softer dark against the window's paler dark. Then the window itself becomes faintly knowable behind it. Not glass yet, not view, only the place in the wall where the room meets what lies beyond it. The bed remains the nearest truth. Quilt, pillow, sheet, mattress, these still belong to the body more than the room does. But the room is no longer entirely lost in house dark. It has begun, very gently, to return. You do not need to move in order to feel that. The edge of the bedside table is still hidden. The chair in the corner is not yet chair again. The washstand remains only a dim region opposite the bed. Yet the darkness between these things is thinner than it was. The room no longer holds as one continuous shadow. It begins, by degrees too small to be measured, to separate itself back into distances. Outside, the snow has changed the morning before you can see it fully. That is one of the quiet truths of winter cottages. While the house holds night within, the weather continues its work outside without witness. Whatever fell after the curtain ceased to matter as a window. Whatever gathered at the sill, the path, the roof edge, the hedge, the garden gate, has already remade the world beyond the walls by the time the room begins to know it again. The first true light is not light exactly. It is gray, a diluted gray-blue gathering somewhere beyond the pane, enough to find the lower edge of the curtain and hold there. The bed receives none of it directly. It belongs first to the window, then to the room, and only later to the body. That order is right too. Morning in a winter house should not arrive as brightness. It should arrive as permission for things to become visible again. The bed now exists not only through touch, but by outline. The rise of the quilt over your knees, the slope where it falls away at the foot, the dimmer shape of the pillow beside your face where no head rests, the line of the mattress edge under the coverlet. None of these asks to be examined. They simply return. So does the room. The bedside table comes back first as a vertical and horizontal relation. Then the lamp base, dark and still where it was left turned down. Then the wash jug, whose shoulder takes the faintest difference in tone before the bowl below it does. The chair in the corner remains almost entirely shadow, but now shadow with a place and purpose. Below, the house answers once. A board or stair, not loudly enough to become a vent, only clearly enough to say that the cottage is no longer in its deepest, undifferentiated state. The sound does not disturb the room. It helps restore it. The lower floor exists again. The stair exists again. The house is becoming house, not only structure. The bed remains warm. That matters more than any returning light, because the room's reappearance does not ask the body to leave what the night has already made good. The quilt keeps its settled weight. The pillow has lost all trace of its first coolness now. The sheet no longer presents itself as a separate layer against the skin. The mattress remains where it has always been through the hours, broad and honest under shoulder, side, and hip. Morning may return the room to sight, but the bed still keeps the deeper truth of what the night has done. The curtain begins to hold color rather than tone. Not much, only enough that the gray behind it shifts toward the pale, whitened quality of snow-reflected morning rather than ordinary dawn. That is how the outside world returns here, not through horizon or sun, but through what the snow gives back to the light. Even before the curtain is moved, you know the morning beyond the cottage will not be the same world that lay outside in late afternoon yesterday. The night has remade it. When at last you turn your head a little towards the window, the room moves with you in a more recognizable way. The curtain is curtain again. The window is window. The pale field beyond it is not sky alone, not ground alone, but both whitened together by snow. If you were to draw the curtain back now, the path, the gate, the roof line, the hedge would all still be there, but altered. Softer in one way, clearer in another. The night's snow would have filled some seams, rounded some edges, laid a brighter stillness over everything that had gone dark too early to be watched. You do not need to rise to know this. The cottage brings the knowledge inward through light before it ever asks for movement. The lower part of the house begins to return in the same manner. Not all at once, not as activity, only in relation. Downstairs is no longer merely ember memory and house warmth held from below. It is becoming the lower room again. The hearth exists there, whether as ash, low red remains, or the cooled shape of last evening's fire. The chair exists there with the blanket left over its back. The table exists there with the mug and spoon where they were set aside. The boots remain by the door. The coat hangs on its peg. All these things reform below the bedroom not because they are seen, but because the house no longer needs to hold itself as one sleeping body. Morning allows it to become cottage again. A little more light reaches the room. The washstand is now fully itself. The chair in the corner returns from shadow. The floorboards nearest the bed separate from one another by grain and seam. The lamp chimney, faintly dimmed at the top from last evening's use, catches a pale line and loses it again. Outside, the snow-muted world grows clearer by degrees. The brightness at the pane no longer belongs only to sky. It belongs to ground as well. That is the great winter reversal. Morning light does not merely descend from above. It rises too, reflected back from what the snow has laid over roof, sill, path, garden, hedge, and lane. The world beyond the curtain is not brighter because the sun is high. It is brighter because the earth has been whitened into answering it. You shift only enough to let the room settle more comfortably around wakefulness without fully entering it. The body need not leave the bed for the house to feel fully returned. The cottage only needs to become visible again in the right order. Bed, room, lower house, outside world, morning held over snow. A faint morning sound comes from outside at last. Not many. Not the full beginning of day, only one small signal that the world beyond the cottage has started again in its own time. A distant footstep on snow-softened ground, or the muffled closure of a door, or the first careful sound of someone moving in the cold before the day has gathered pace. The snow changes these sounds too. It keeps them from carrying sharply. It rounds them before they reach the bedroom wall. The house remains gentler than they are. That may be the finest truth of the ending. The cottage has carried the night so fully that the morning does not have to arrive as interruption. It can return quietly, room by room, object by object, edge by edge, without breaking the rest it has protected. The bedroom now stands fully in snowy morning form, the curtain pale at its edge, the window holding whitened light, the bed visibly inhabited, the pillow marked by the night's long use, the quilt carrying the softer settled rise and fall of a room that has been slept in rather than merely prepared. The wash jug, the chair, the lamp, each one returned in morning quiet rather than evening glow. Below, the house is cottage again. Stair, landing, lower room, hearth, boots by the door, kettle waiting on the hob, the threshold still shut against winter. None of this asks to be enacted immediately. Outside, the snow continues its work even when no longer falling. It lies, it holds, it keeps the world slowed. The path beyond the door will be paler now than it was yesterday. The gate latch colder, the stone step edged in white, the wall's upper lines softened, the hedge gathered into a simpler shape, the roof carrying a clean lay of brightness under the new day. All of that remains there waiting, but none of it needs to be checked before rest can deepen fully into sleep. The cottage has held through the whole cycle, reached in winter afternoon, awakened by fire, gathered into evening, carried upward into bed, settled through deep night, returned now in snow-muted morning. Because it has done all of that, nothing more has to be watched over. You lie within the last quiet of that completion. The bed still holds, the room has returned, the house has separated gently back into its rooms and objects. The snow has remade the world outside. Morning has come far enough for everything to be trustworthy again. There is no need to rise yet, no need to look more closely, no need to tend the fire at once, or fill the kettle, or draw the curtain fully back. Those things belong to the day that will happen later. For now, the cottage has done what it needed to do. It held the weather outside. It held the warmth inside. It held the evening, the night, the embers, the bed, the dark, and the returning light. And there, with the snow-lit morning now resting quietly at the window, the house restored to itself after the long inward hours, and the whole winter cycle completed, so fully that nothing in it needs your keeping anymore. The final truth arrives as naturally as the first fire did. The cottage will carry the rest. The snow can go on whitening the world beyond the walls. The lower room can wait in its pale morning stillness. The boots can remain by the door. The kettle can remain on the hob. The path can keep its new brightness outside the gate. You are already inside what needed to be reached. The house has held. The night has passed. The morning has come back changed. And with nothing left now to prepare, follow, or keep in place, you can let yourself drift the rest of the way down, while the snowy cottage goes on holding the day for you.